Spoken on the topics faith, family and freedom in Cuba, Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
You ever dealt with one of those people that they feel like, whether it's actually true or not, they feel like they can get away with anything. They can do anything they want to, they can behave any way they want to, and no one will ever call them to the carpet on it. No one will ever scold them, tell them they were wrong, tell them you can't do that, or there are penalties for that, or that's just not fair, or that's just not right. And even if you tell them that, they kind of laugh in your face and they're like, nobody messes with me. I get to do what I want to. That's what I want to talk about today on Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I remember when Tommy Wilson and I went for a bike ride one day. We went probably 6 or 7 miles away from home. We were under 10 years old. And 6 or 7 miles away from home, riding around the dirt track of the local Enid Speedway, Tommy and I encountered one of the school bullies. He was a high school guy. We were not. And as we encountered him standing in his front yard, Tommy's brand new 10-speed bicycle, this guy pulls out a hatchet and literally chops Tommy's front wheel in half. Bends the rim, cuts the tire and the tube just right in half. Apparently he'd just been sharpening his axe. He wanted to show us how sharp it was. He cut the tire and the tube completely. I was stunned, absolutely stunned, that somebody would have the gall to do that to somebody else. It just could not register in my mind that somebody could have that kind of audacity of meanness. The worst part, though, was that I told him, you're going to get in trouble for that. And he waved his axe at me and he says, who's going to get me in trouble? My dad would probably laugh if he saw me doing that, but he's not here. Mom's not home. And what are you going to do about it? And I hate to admit it, but he was right. And you know what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. That moment of injustice still registers in my brain almost 50 years later. I cannot forget the moment that my mind, my naive mind, was awakened to the fact that there are some people who genuinely believe and sometimes do get away with anything they want to. They're not held accountable. Well, let me tell you, as a leader, accountability is a good thing. Accountability is a good thing not only for those who might be on the other side of the injustice, those who become the victims of the arrogant, I will do what I want to, destructive behavior, but accountability is a good thing for the person whose life may feel like they kind of get to do what they want to, because that lack of accountability leads to a lack of integrity. And that lack of integrity leads to behavior that is not only unseemly, but dangerous, not only to yourself, but to those around you. And if you feel like, for whatever reason, whether it's in the microcosms of not taking responsibility for the little things that you should take responsibility for, clean your own room, mind your own taxes, take care of your own accounting, make sure you pay your bills on time. If you find yourself not dealing with those things on the small level, then chances are they're going to be bigger things as well, especially as a leader, that you feel like you can get away with, or that if there are consequences, I'll talk my way out of it, or if there are consequences, I'll shun them off on the other person, or if there are consequences, they won't be that bad. And while those problems are small, you might be right. Unfortunately, it leads to a character trait. There are a lot of people who have felt for a long time like, I can get away with anything. I can do whatever I want to. I'm not going to have any consequences. I'll never have to pay a price for that. And because they've kind of gone through life that way, the magnitude of the things that they attempt to get away with gets larger and larger and larger until eventually they find themselves into a high-level position of leadership or politics or finance. And the decisions they make don't impact them anymore. They impact dozens, hundreds, perhaps thousands or even millions of other people. They do what they want to do. They feel like there are no consequences. And here's kind of the sad reality of it. There's going to be a place in our life where that switch it just flips, like a breaker switch in your house. I don't know if you know this or not, but accountability is kind of like a breaker switch. And maybe you have a power strip. I have several of them here in the studio, and each one of them has its own load. It will bear 20 amps. If I put something on it that tries to take too much power from that circuit, the fuse blows. And when the fuse blows on that power strip, everything on that power strip loses power. Now, if I continue to overload that power strip, or I replace the fuse with a fuse that won't blow because the level's too high, that's like changing the level of accountability. I don't like that my boss is yelling at me, so I get rid of my boss, but I don't change my behavior. You follow me? It's like replacing the fuse. Well, the next level up might not be the fuse. It might be the GCFI, the ground fault circuit breaker. And so that circuit interrupter, it doesn't really trip the breaker at the main power panel, but it does turn off all the outlets. So if I replace the fuse, that level of accountability, then the same overload is going to cause that ground fault to click. And when it does, not just the stuff on that power strip, but the entire circuit and all of the outlets associated with it will go off. Now, maybe you've encountered this. Maybe you've been weed eating in the front yard and you unplug the cord, or you trip over something and suddenly it goes off, and the next thing you know, somebody's yelling from the bathroom, my hairdryer won't work. Well, it's because of that ground fault, and a lot of times those are connected to each other. Outside circuits, inside circuits, all of them around water. Yeah, there's a reason for that, so you don't electrocute yourself. There's a reason that the system defaults to cut off the power when you're in a place of danger. Electrocution, starting a fire, burning the building down. And see, all of these are directly related to each other. But kind of like when we were doing an event this last weekend, the host of the event had a generator. They were trying to set up their inflatable arch, and the generator popped because they put in an old light. It was a heat lamp with a floodlight in it. It was just way too much power. And it popped a fuse on the generator. And they went through everything they could to get it to come back up, and they could get the generator to start, but it wouldn't make any power. And so I went through the fuse circuits, and I found not only had they had to reset each of the channels, but the plug that they had plugged the light into had its own ground fault, and they had tripped that. So they're moving up the ladder a little bit. I reset that, told them don't plug that light back in. It draws too much power. I hope you're catching this relationship. See, there are a whole lot of people who think they can dodge accountability. And what they're really doing is drawing too much power. They're pulling too much out of the system. They're over their limit. They're over their ability to regulate their own behavior. They have no accountability. There's no one like a fuse to say, you got to stop doing that. You're going to burn the whole thing down. Well, we were able to reset the ground fault, get the generator back up, and they were able to use it for what they intended and plug in our stuff as well. And we were all good for the next 5 hours. The generator ran just fine as long as you didn't plug in that faulty light bulb that had a short in it. The accountability for a bad light bulb was the ground fault on the generator. The circuit breaker told us there's something wrong with that light bulb. If your organization doesn't have accountability that cuts off the flow of power to someone who is corrupt, it's going to burn your company to the ground. You've got to have systems in place to protect yourself and your organization. Now, there's one more level than that, right? Actually, there's probably two at least. The next level is if the ground fault doesn't catch it, or you try to bypass the ground fault by plugging into an outlet that's not a ground fault, and you've replaced the fuse in your strip and you've got too many things plugged in. I want you to think National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, when the Christmas tree burned down after the cat bit through the wires, and all the wires that were plugged into that, there were like 900 wires coming off of one power strip. Yeah, there are a lot of people who operate that way, not only with their power strips, but with their life. They're sucking too much power in too many different directions. They think because I'm the leader of this, well, I can also get away with that, and I can also wield my influence over there, and I can make these people do what I want them to do, and I can manipulate this negotiation back here, and I can get the best deal over here. That you see it all the time. People in city council or school boards who are driving brand new Lexuses, and you're like, how did that happen? Well, nobody wants to admit it was technically legally a bribe, but there's no accountability for where they came into the money. There were 5 IRS agents that were indicted yesterday for cheating the system during COVID of getting the PPP loans. New cars, Gucci bags, the list went on and on of the things they did with the money that had nothing to do with taking care of employees. Everyone needs accountability. You can overload the system like that Christmas tree, like the fuse box that's got too many wires popping out of it. And the next thing that happens is the circuit breaker goes. Now, when the circuit breaker goes in your house, half your house goes dark. You don't just lose power in one room, you lose power through a large portion of your house. Usually those are wired together for a reason. To indicate to you, hey, there's a problem, it needs your attention, you better deal with it. But if you don't deal with it, or you bypass it, or you overload another part of the system, when accountability gets out of control in one department, if the people overseeing that department don't bring it into check, then the fuse is not going to blow next time when it's supposed to, and we're going to have a higher level power draw on the same circuit. We have people with no accountability who don't get reprimanded, they don't get caught, they don't get penalized, they don't get punished, they get away with it. It doesn't just encourage them to behave that way again. No, at that point, the attitude of inaccountability becomes a contagious attitude. And all of a sudden, a whole team of people went, well, they got the PPP loan and they bought a new car with it. They got the PPP loan and they put new rims on it. And they got a PPP loan and they went on vacation with it. Well, I should go get a PPP loan too. I need to go get my own money like that. I need to do whatever I want to with it. I mean, it's my money, right? It's my company. I get to do what I want with it. No, that's why there's accountability. You've got to have accountability built into your own systems. Because like the little fuse and the tiny little power strip, if you've got accountability in your own system, in yourself, in your integrity, when the fuse pops, you go, hold up. Maybe my power was out of whack. Maybe I was pushing the limits. Maybe I was taking advantage somewhere that I wasn't supposed to be. Maybe it was small in a relationship, in the way I handle finances. But if I don't take care of that, the next fuse may be a letter from the IRS. The next one may be an orange jumpsuit. You follow me? Accountability's got to start small and it's got to start personal, but it also will bleed throughout your organization. If people in your organization are not held accountable for their behavior will seep into other departments. And that lack of accountability will become contagious. And everyone will operate without that accountability. Maybe what they try to get away with will be a little bit different levels of harm, different levels of illegality, different levels of compromise. But it will seep through everything. Stealing food out of the refrigerator with somebody else's name on it, taking company resources to do personal projects with. All of those things are under the same umbrella of accountability. And a leader who does not demonstrate accountability, who doesn't raise their hand and go, I messed up, I went too far, I'm going to fix this. A leader who's not willing to do that will breed within their organization a lack of accountability. And that lack of accountability will eventually burn the house down. That's just the way it works. If you don't fix the problem that blows the fuse, instead you try to put a higher level fuse, you're going to start a fire. And if you get to the level that the ground fault cuts you off and says, there's too much power load on this circuit. If you don't redistribute the power, if you don't deal with the problem that's causing the circuit to break, you're just going to keep overloading the circuit until you get to the next level, and the problem gets bigger, and the hazards get greater, and the danger is larger, and the number of people who get involved in the problem gets bigger as well, both from the outside and the inside. The number of people who are looking for criminal activity to be prosecuted and the number of people who are going to get caught up in that sweep, both sides of that will grow if you don't deal with accountability at an early stage. And if it gets large enough, the transformer down the street will pop. And when that happens, the whole neighborhood goes black. And then everybody in the neighborhood comes out on the sidewalk to look around and go, what idiot blew the transformer? Who is it that's trying to weld with their kitchen toaster? Who is it that's trying to do more than they're supposed to be with the authority and the power that they have? And that will shine very brightly. Everybody's going to see it, probably because by that time, the fire trucks will be rolling up to your house because it's smoking and it's on fire. Because you didn't deal with accountability when it was a small fuse. You didn't deal with an overdraw of power when it was a small problem to solve. And now you've burned the house down and possibly the neighborhood because you let accountability get out of control. I hope you've been able to follow this analogy. It was the simplest one I could come up with on the fly. But if you as a leader don't hold yourself accountable when the fuse pops, when the small indicators tell you, whoa, back off, you're drawing too much on your own power, then you're going to lead to bigger problems. And if you don't deal with those small fuse problems early on for yourself, then you're going to teach everyone that you lead they don't have to either. Eventually, you're going to burn the place down. You've got to take accountability as a leader. You've got to hold yourself accountable. You've got to hold people on your team accountable. And you've got to be responsible. That's called integrity. It's what you do when nobody's looking. That's how you determine whether or not you have accountability. And if you need somebody else to look over your shoulder and hold you accountable, get busy finding that somebody right now before the legal teams find that somebody for you. That might show up at your doorstep with coats and ties and guns drawn. I'm just saying, you've got to hold you accountable first before anybody else does. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.